Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm John Peters and I'm a therapist who's been in practice over 25 years. And I've been doing telehealth over the last 6 years and have probably delivered over 2,000 telehealth sessions in that time. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about privacy concerns for telehealth visits. Okay, so recently I made a video that talked about privacy concerns for therapy records. And if you want to check out that video, I'll put a link up at the top. But in this video, I'm going to talk about just some rights and responsibilities that you have as a recipient of telehealth services. So, a brief introduction to the history of telehealth. A lot of insurance companies were kind of in a pilot mode and we're reimbursing for some telehealth services up to about 6-ish years ago. And then they decided that it was a good thing. And so they rolled it out. So basically, commercial plans will reimburse for telehealth services. And then lots of states passed laws that clarified that telehealth had parity with regular, normal in-office visits. And so utilization started to go up quite a bit prior to the pandemic. Then the pandemic hit. And then Medicare rolled it out fully. And so utilization of telehealth has gone through the roof and continues to climb. And a lot of people like me who had been doing it for a while have expanded the percentage of our practice devoted to telehealth. And I do quite a bit these days. So I want to comment a little bit about privacy concerns in telehealth because there's some additional concerns that I think would be good for you to be aware of. Okay, so in a normal office setting, right, you as a recipient have some things that are easily attainable that are more challenged when you're dealing with a telehealth appointment, like a phone appointment or a video conferencing appointment. For example, if you walked into my regular brick and mortar office, you had a visual sense immediately of the setting. You had a visual sense of my actual office. And, you know, we go in, we close the door, we're alone in the room. You can see the whole room, you can see me. There are lots of aspects of that environment that are readily available to you to let you have a sense of being in a private space. But in a telehealth appointment, right, either on a phone call or a video conferencing call, you have a limited view of the provider. On the phone call, you have the voice and what you can hear in the oral space that comes through on the call, which might not be a lot. And in the video call, you have more, like you can see this portion of my office, but you can't see beyond the edge of whatever the camera is going to provide, right? So you don't know. Maybe I have an office prop set up here, but I'm actually sitting on a beach and it just looks like an office or something. That might be nice for me, but you see where I'm getting at, that you are not able to see the room. Like you can't see whether my door is closed. It is, but you can't see that. So with a telehealth appointment, part of what it means is that you deserve to have a provider who is adequately ensuring privacy in the space where they are delivering the telehealth service. Right? And you have the right as the recipient to ask questions about that, right? You can say, hey, John, I'm just interested. Where do you do your sessions? That shouldn't offend me. If it offends your provider, to me, that's a red flag. We have that absolute responsibility to ensure that whether we're in an in-office appointment or whether we're in a telehealth office appointment, and if you ask questions about that to be well informed, then that supports the process. And I think you should be able to ask those questions. So feel free to do that. I mean, in general, I think a lot of therapists are just doing that. But of course, when the pandemic hit and everybody started changing their work environments, maybe a lot of therapists weren't going into their normal office and were working from home. And is their home office private, you know, in the sense that, let's say, the therapist family members are not going to be sitting, you know, next to them or something in some way that would undermine the privacy. So you know, you have the right to ask questions about that. I have not heard of a lot of problems with that, but you know, humans are capable of a wide range of behaviors. who knows what's going on. I mean, I will tell you about one case that's an egregious example. I asked someone how their family member was doing because I knew that they were having a rough time. And it was a person where what I knew about them would cause me to reasonably expect if they were in therapy, it would be not just garden variety therapy, but they would be dealing with very, very sensitive triggering issues. And the person I asked said, well, it's not going well. And I said, why? And they said, well, because they got this telehealth therapist, and the therapist was in this noisy environment. And at one point, the patient asked the therapist, was like, hey, are you in a public space? And it turned out, I guess the therapist was like doing the telehealth appointment in a cafeteria. Now, maybe they had like earphones in and in a way that like other people weren't going to hear that, but like that's nuts to me, like just incredibly bad, So, I mean, hopefully we could just think people aren't that stupid in general, but, again, humans are capable of a wide range of behaviors. So in any case, you can't ensure that for me, but you certainly can ask that of me. And you can certainly ask me in a way that holds me accountable to that and say, hey, John, I want to know that you're in a secure environment, right? Also, even if it is relatively secure, the therapist has a responsibility to make sure it sounds secure on the phone call or on the video call, right? Like if I had the window open on my office, unlike now where the wind chill is like -10 today, but let's say it was a warm sunny day and I had my window open and I was sitting like situated near a busy street where people were walking by. Maybe those people can't hear into the session, but you don't need to be hearing like a bunch of people talking while we're having a session that you can't see off screen, right? That's not going to be conducive to your sense of being taken care of, right? But also on your end, you do have some responsibility to make sure that when you do a teleconferencing call, either by phone or with video conferencing, that you also set it up in a secure, private environment in your space, because that's something I can control in my brick and mortar office. I don't have control over that. If you're my patient and you pick up the phone or open the video, I'm not in control in the same way of the setting. So that means that I have to rely on you to be compliant with a reasonable amount of controlling your end of the setting so that we're still in a private space. And, in my private practice, I send out an instruction sheet that very clearly explains that to my new patients. And on the platform MD Live, which I work on too, they explain that to people very clearly. But, I've had people open the session where clearly like there's a kid in the room. Now, if that's a 6-month-old infant, it's not really going to bother me because a 6-month-old is going to be oblivious to any type of conversation we have. But if it's like a 10-year-old sitting next to the patient doing their homework, I don't want the 10-year-old in the session. If it's an individual session and the adult's going to be talking about adult stuff, I don't want to include the 10-year-old if it's not a family session where we're including the 10-year-old, right? So be alone is one. And be in a private space. Also, don't include partners and family members surreptitiously in a backward attempt to do family therapy when it's set up as an individual appointment. So a couple of times I have had patients and they didn't say this before, like this is a couples session and my partner is here. But like halfway through the session, I realized that there was another person in the room. Either the person coughed or somehow I realized that the person was there. And in both of the cases I'm thinking of, I think the strategy on the patient's end was to include the partner in a session as a couples session because they couldn't get the person to go to couples therapy and they hadn't negotiated that with me, right? I thought it was an individual session. They didn't say, John, I'm going to include my partner in the session. They just said, here I am for my individual session. And they were just situating themselves, down on the other end of the couch or whatever from the other person so the other person could overhear the session in a way to try to influence the other person participating in dealing with the therapeutic issues or whatever. But if it's an individual session, be there as an individual. Do not include other people, kids, partners, other family members, whomever. If you're going to try to have a family session or a couple session, make sure that every single person is 100% bought into that process. You, your other person, and the therapist. Everyone should know, at least at the beginning of the session, if not before, what the constituents of that session are going to be, right? Because that puts me as the therapist in a compromised position. If I'm talking to you in my office individually, I, again, can immediately see that other people are not going to overhear it. But if you've opened that session and you're sitting next to someone, that means you and I are having a conversation where I am talking to you as an individual, and yet I'm being overheard by another person. And so if I make a comment about that person, however, whatever the comment is, positive or critical or whatever, then I can't be responsible for my interaction with the other person because I don't even know the other person's there, right? So that's not okay. Do not do that. So anyway, I wanted to throw these ideas out there just about privacy concerns with telehealth. And also I'll also say that, having done telehealth for a few years now, I'm probably going to make a video in the near future where I talk about a wider set, not just these privacy concerns, but just my thoughts on telehealth, having done it a couple thousand times over the last 6 years. At this point as a therapist, and what I think about the service and what advice I would give people who are prospectively like looking out to get telehealth versus in-office services and things like that. So watch the channel for that. If you like this video, feel very free to hit the like button because it teaches the YouTube algorithm who to expose the video to and help with my audience. And if you want to be apprised of future videos, feel very free to hit the subscribe button. I appreciate additional subscribers. So thanks for joining me today, and I will see you in a future video.